Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to another Nacho Tuesday. And today I have Tony Zheng here with Operations Army. And without further ado, we'd love if you could introduce your company to us and tell us more about what you do.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Andy. And thanks for having me as well. Happy Nacho Tuesday to everybody who's tuning in today. So, in a nutshell, I'm the CEO and founder of a company called Operations Army. And so, what we do very simply is we help businesses and other startups hire top international talent across a variety of roles like sales, operation, accounting, and growth marketing. And really, the value proposition for companies is threefold. So, number one, we handle the entire recruiting, interviewing, onboarding, and training process so you get the right talent out the box ready to go. Number two is we offer flexible hours so you can get someone for as low as 20 hours or as high as like 40, 50, 60 hours a week. And then the last piece, which is my favorite as well, is we help companies save 50% or more on headcount costs. So those are all the value propositions of what we can do at Ops Army.
That's great. And where do a lot of these freelancers come from? Do you have a solid base in Europe, or where is the distribution for that?
It's a good question. So we're pretty agnostic at this point. When I first started the business, I spent a lot of my time actually developing a lot of sourcing pipelines and strategic partnerships in a lot of these countries across the world. And so what we found is there's really no one singular place for top talent. So a lot of our talent these days come from various parts of Latin and South America, Europe as well, and then also various parts of Asia. So it's really dependent on what types of roles that you're looking for and essentially around, what time zones you want these folks to be working on. And then we go out and we find you these folks.
That's great. So I think I heard a story there. So you said you traveled around a lot and you got to meet a lot of folks in different countries.
That's right.
Tell us more about those journeys and kind of how you got to where you're at in your career today.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. So I think I'm a little spoiled in this regards with just having the opportunities to do a lot of traveling as well. So I'm a big believer in experiences over material things. And so whenever I can, obviously past few years has been a bit crazy, but I did a lot of travel as well. Yeah, to say the least, just a little crazy, So I did a lot of traveling. And I think it ties in quite well with my professional background. And so kind of my personal story is that my parents immigrated here in the early 1990s when they were just teenagers. And, for us, it was like had nothing, just literally came with a backpack and a suitcase. And, my parents really worked a variety of odd jobs, early on in their career, and then eventually cobbled together enough funds and actually started a small business of their own. So growing up, I saw like my parents work these, ruthless, ridiculous 12, 14-hour days, 7 days a week. And, growing up, I would actually, my form of spending time with my parents was actually going to, sit at the family business. And so that for me, obviously like starting a small business or any business for that matter is really, really hard. And you have to put in the hours, you have to sacrifice. But on the flip side of that, it also gives you, a different perspective on life. It's truly, if you put in the work, you can get anything you want out of it. And, it provided food for me and a roof over my head. And so growing up, I loved kind of building, loved being in that business environment. So went off to college, dabbled, worked at startups, worked, in investment banking, worked in venture capital as well. But nothing really stuck with me. Because it wasn't as similar as kind of the experiences that I had. And so what ended up happening was, after college, went off to work at McKinsey out in San Francisco. And McKinsey was great for me because it allowed me to, taste a little bit of these different experiences. So I worked in, predominantly in their new ventures lab, which is, working with these growth stage startups and early stage startups on a variety of different things like go to market, hiring, talent acquisition, culture building, product development. And so I got to see kind of what it was like working at these startups. Loved it, right? Left, launched an insurance company actually. So this is back in the days when, Metro Mile, Oscar Health were going public, Hippo were going public. And so there was a lot of buzz and a lot of opportunity. Discovered that it was really, really hard building an insurance company. various levels of success, and
Mhm.
then actually left to work as a first product hire at a healthcare startup. So healthcare startup sold earlier this year, and then for about the past 2 years or so, right, I've been building Ops Army. But after the healthcare startup sold, I decided to go full time.
Nice. That's great to hear. Yeah. So yeah, you got to put in long hours. Unfortunately, as a startup, and having that experience at McKinsey,
Yeah.
sometimes it's great to be able to work with a lot of. I used to have an agency myself, so being able to work with a lot of different startups and companies and kind of see them at various levels of growth and success, it really teaches you a lot and gives you a lot of perspective on on your company as you look to build it as well.
Mhm.
So one thing we're here to discuss today is founder time management, right? So you do have to put in a lot of hours to be successful as a startup. There's no way around that. But efficiency is another thing that a lot of founders overlook. How to balance your time effectively, or the idea of delegation is a key to leadership. I guess what tips do you have for founders out there that are looking to scale their business without burning themselves out?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, Andy. And I 100% agree with you when you say that there is no substitute for the hour. So, if you were to plot it right, I would be very surprised if you don't see like a direct, one-to-one correlation with the number of hours you put in and the success and likelihood of success for your company. And so there's no getting around that. You simply have to put in the long hours. But that being said, though, having worked with a lot of kind of high functioning, high output, fast growth startups and executive leadership teams, both at McKinsey and over the past couple of years, there's a few things that I've learned. So, I think it's important to separate the personal piece from the professional piece. And so on the professional side, I would really break it down to like three big components or buckets of things, right? Number one is you want to do things that give you leverage. Number two is that you want to prioritize ruthlessly. And then the last piece is you want to constantly audit how you're spending your time. So let me break that down and what that means, right? So when I say do things that give you leverage, that means you can't always be in the weeds of building a company, right? In the weeds of customer support. It's good for you to have some exposure to that, so you really know what people are saying, what your customers are complaining about, or giving you good feedback on. But the reality of it is that you can't just be in the weeds so much. So you want to do things that give you leverage. How do you do that, right? Number one is you want to hire the right talent, and so and this spans across the board. It's not just growth people, software engineers, but for you as a founder, right? If you feel yourself strapped for time, and I use the word founder very loosely, you could be like a small business owner, an independent consultant or a coach, or you could be, the founder of like $1 billion unicorn. But the reality of it is that you want to hire the right people, and that can mean hiring an executive assistant or a chief of staff to support you on your day-to-day workflow. Number two is that you want to delegate, delegate, delegate. So, I don't know if people have seen this like 2x2 matrix, but the way I think about a founder's time is that there's really three things that only a CEO or a founder could do. That's one, setting the strategy, two, hiring, and then the third piece is ensuring that there's enough capital in the bank. So everything else that's not directly related to those things, growth of the company, generating revenue, you should delegate away. And that's how you kind of create leverage for yourself. And then the last piece of that first bucket is, I would say, is like you want to create SOPs and systems. So anything from like onboarding, process creation. If you find yourself doing something like more than 2 or 3 times, how do you create some sort of documentation around it such that it allows you to, hand this playbook, hand this documentation off to someone and they can run with it.
Yeah.
Those are all kind of things that you could do to give yourself leverage. And moving on to the second bucket around prioritizing ruthlessly, that's I don't even know if there's a way to phrase this. It's like prioritize ruthlessly, ruthlessly, right?
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is, you want to be incredibly cognizant of how you're spending your time. Something I do is number one is I plan my day out in advance. So the night before, I plan it all out in advance. And then I actually color code how I'm spending my time, how much of it is on meetings, how much of it is like deep focused thinking work, how
Yeah.
much is it training people, hiring, onboarding. And you really want to be able to track your time, very diligently, but then also prioritize ruthlessly. Each day you really only want to be spending your time on the 2 or 3 biggest, potatoes that really move your business forward. Everything else, delegate away or don't even do.
Yeah.
Then the last piece is like constantly auditing how you're spending your time. So, some kind of, this is stuff I've learned over the years as well, is every Saturday I do reflections. And this is very simply a few bullets on what went well this week, what didn't go well, how can I kind of improve next week. And that kind of quiet time, I spend about an hour doing it, is really, really powerful for me because it helps me align myself. Because, in the day to day, things are just too crazy and it's just too chaotic.
Yeah, I agree with that point. A lot of founders and executives don't give themselves enough time to really reflect on anything. And a lot of the best strategies actually come from these times where you just kind of block out a little bit to think through problems.
Mhm.
Because it's very easy to get caught in the day to day and the weeds, as you say, meeting after meeting. And, you don't really have time to apply to thinking about problems and how to more effectively solve them. It's easy to get caught into a loop, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why it's so important to block time out for deep focus work. Andy, you're going to laugh at this, but if you look at my calendar, it's literally like a, bad Picasso painting. So each of my days, every day is blocked out with time. And obviously, sometimes, meetings go over, whatever, but I am incredibly ruthless with my time. And you really have to block time out for deep focus work. And it's not just deep focus work as well, which I think a lot of times a lot of founders forget. You also want to carve time out for self-learning as well. And
Yeah.
so that means reading up on your industry, talking to other experts in the field, whatever it is to push your business forward. Because if you don't carve time out to learn, and you are the captain of the ship, of your ship, you're not going to know where to steer your business. So it's incredibly important to also carve time out for self-learning as well.
That's a great point. I also always make sure that I block time out in my calendar for especially like busy work, and I kind of do the same thing. So just to ensure that I do get that hour block to have that time to really think through things or read up on industry knowledge, or just get some hardcore work done, right? Because sometimes it's easy to just go from meeting to meeting, and you realize at the end of the day you've just been talking all day, but you haven't really put pen to paper and got real work done.
Absolutely, absolutely. I love that. And for everybody, it's different. You have to learn your own working style. So I am a bit of a late night owl. So I find some of my most productive deep working times actually past 10 p.m. So I'll tell my team, hey, if you see an email or a Slack message from me late at night, don't answer it. Answer it in the morning. Or sometimes I'll schedule send them for 8 a.m. in the morning, when during normal business hours,
Yeah.
and that works for me, right?
Mhm.
Some people might really like having that deep focus time in the morning, where they could go heads down and then work without any meetings. If that's you, fine, do your thing. But it's really important to also figure out what is your own working style and how are you best productive.
That's a great point. So, one thing I do want to dive into more is the delegation. So, building a team is really critical for helping grow your company, right? And I'm a big fan of kind of working yourself out of the job. It's important for a CEO or founder to really understand every aspect of the business. You don't have to be an expert in every area, but you need to be able to put the whole thing together like a Picasso, if you will.
Mhm.
You have to understand all these key areas. Otherwise, you don't know how to hire the right people that are they're specialists in that area, and they're always going to be better than you because if you follow the Pareto principle, you can never effectively put 100% of your time in anything, but you could put 20% of the time to understand maybe 80% of it, and that makes you pretty dang dangerous, right? But there's some people that put 80% of their time into something, or even 100%, and they know that last little 20% to really move the needle, I guess. So what tips do you have for finding these right team members, and then recruiting them, and then retaining them onto your team?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, Andy. And so you're spot on. Some of the best leaders that I've met over the course of my time at McKinsey and also just being a part of the startup community, they're what I would consider expert generalists. So they're not this like T type individual where they know a little bit about, like let's say to 8 disciplines, but they're really deep on one. I think some of the best founders are these expert generalists where they're top 25, top 15, 10% in all of these different buckets. So that makes you dangerous enough, but it also where you can, for example, speak the language, but you're not so deep on like tightening the wrenches and the bolts on the company machinery. And so, to your question around how do you find, attract, top talent, how do you kind of motivate them, and how do you retain them? So, one of the things I love about building the business that I'm building today, which is, you know, this is literally the thesis, very simply put. We're in a very high interest rate environment where capital is increasingly harder to come by. And this environment will be, the new normal, if you want to think about it, for now until the rest of 2024, possibly even part of 2025 as well. But amid this environment, startups still have this mandate to grow, and you have to be very cost conscientious. So how do you even think about hiring people? How do you think about even up-leveling your time, right? So really, you have to look at other pockets of talent, and that's where international talent comes in. I think hiring internationally and building a good team would have been very, very difficult 4 or 5 years ago. But we're now in a very different environment where you have all these tools, Zoom, Slack, etc., that facilitates collaboration. You also have this broader acceptance of remote work. A lot of companies are either, hybrid work environment or completely remote. And so these things have made it easier to work across different time zones. And so what you start to see is like, you can actually find incredibly high caliber talent. I'm not talking about like, your customer support person at AT&T, which is oftentimes the kind of bias or the stigma that people think of when they think of international talent. These are like, growth marketers who could, run Google ads for you, create content to improve your SEO. These are like, recently I just staffed someone with 15 years of accounting experience onto like an FP&A team. And all of these things help give you leverage, give your team, give your leadership team leverage over their time and over their workflows as well. So they focus on the biggest priorities and strategy, which is like, how in the world do we increase revenue? How do we close more sales? How do we build these strategic partnerships? And then everything else in terms of the actual blocking and tackling, delegate it to, like an international kind of colleague, so that you could really, really supercharge your growth. So that's kind of my 2 cents and what I've seen happen in the industry.
Great. Do you have any more tips around how to manage effectively a team that's spread out across different time zones? We mentioned, setting up the right processes and documentation is very key. So you could take an internal process that works and you could pass it on to somebody and let them run with it. But any other tips around that? Because I know a lot of people in our audience and a lot of founders and business leaders are out there are, doing exactly what you just mentioned, growing internationally. So I think there's still some misnomers around that and some or misconceptions, so to say.
Right. No, absolutely. So the way I think about kind of my job or really any leadership's job is half of it really is finding and recruiting, just like really finding the right people who are good fits for the company. And then the other half of it is how do you set them up for continued success so that they continue to build your business is around for 5, 10 plus years, and you become a unicorn, right? Stated very simply. So I think in order to kind of, build that right culture and that working norm, you have to set expectations from the start. And so a lot of what we do with our clients these days is actually onboarding and training support, where we will not only find them the right people, but we'll also work with them to build out an onboarding process, right? How do I kind of share my expectations for what I expect this role to be? How do I share my own working styles, everything from, Tony's a bit of a night owl, don't answer his emails at night, to everything like, hey, it's okay if I need a block time out during the day to go deep down and then, have focused work time with no meetings. So you want to set those expectations very clearly up front. And then you also want to build a culture of ownership and empowerment. So, something else I've heard from, again, a bias in the industry misconception is a lot of these international talents are the ones who can come in and you have to create the SOP or the playbook and then they follow it, right? I
Yeah.
think that makes sense if you're hiring for like just generic kind of international talent. For us, at least, we hire for the top 1%, where we specifically screen out whether or not they have this ownership mindset. Do they have this higher level creativity where
Mhm.
they can build the plane, build the process as they're going through it? And so you want to trust, people with these opportunities, and frankly just give them opportunities as well to kind of up level in their career, take on more ownership, be the ones who actually create the processes and systems themselves. And then the last piece is regular check-ins, right? Having one-on-ones with your employees. You want to treat international talent as you would any other talent, domestic, right? Even talent like across the room from you,
Yeah.
if you're working in an office. And the more kind of embedded they can be in the company, the more you check in with them, have one-on-ones, have performance reviews. All of those things help ensure that you hire them, you hire the right talent, but then you also kind of train and develop them to continue to perform well.
Yeah, and that's one thing I've seen with a lot of companies that don't do remote work well. They're not, first of all, they're not delegating enough work to people, so they feel
Mhm.
kind of lost. Like, what am I doing here? And then two, there's not enough regular check-ins or touch points with management or their peers, where they feel disconnected from the company culture and the company's mission and drive overall.
Yeah.
So that's really important to set those regular checkpoints with people.
Absolutely. Absolutely. The other thing I'll also say is, understanding that there's going to be a bit of a cultural difference as well. So, for example, I'll give you like a very tactical example. So, one of my clients hired, a couple of folks from the Philippines, and Asian culture is very implicit versus
Mhm.
explicit, where, folks like to work in teams. There's this team mentality. A lot of kind of communication is implicit where it's like, oh yeah, I just assume that I'm working on this.
Mhm.
If I have questions, I'll just go heads down and work directly versus asking
Yeah.
questions. And the client was obviously very kind of Western based
Yeah.
company, and for them it's like they value communication, like just ask questions. You can ask like 1,000 questions a day, there's no dumb
Mhm.
questions. And so understanding that there's a bit of a cultural difference as well,
Yeah.
is also important. And that's something that we've worked and spent a lot of time on, is like cultural onboarding,
Mhm.
creating kind of cultural working styles as well. So understanding that distinction is also important.
Yeah, I agree, and I've been working international for years, and I've learned a lot from other cultures and some things I could take with me in the tidbits there. But yeah, I got to tell you, when when you're younger and you're kind of figuring it out, you're like trying to understand what people mean, and sometimes you could take it the wrong way when it's just the way that they're used to operating in their culture. So the more that you kind of go through that trial by fire and work with people across the world, you're going to be able to learn a lot of great things that you could bring with yourself and make yourself better too. But it also just gives you a better idea of like how people work out there, so you know what to expect next time.
That's right, 100%.
Great. So I guess, what are some other common operations mistakes that a lot of companies make that they should avoid?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think it's a few things that I've seen come across. So I'll just list them in no particular order. Number one is, I think, not thinking enough about finances and margins. When you're growing like a small business or particularly a startup, you have this kind of just North Star, which is growth at all costs, which might have worked for the past 10, 15 years, but in today's environment, it just simply does not work. And so if you go in with a bit of a financial understanding, what is my gross margins, how much does production of whatever goods cost, you can actually be very thoughtful about how you build your business, and you could be very thoughtful about how you build in the right financial incentives into your operating model. And
Mhm.
so, you know, healthcare, for example, notoriously low margin business because it is very people heavy, and
Yeah.
there's a certain cap, right? Just regulatorily speaking, to profits, and so you want to be very thoughtful about that type of business, and it becomes a risk as well. So how can you set the right guardrails to mitigate that risk. Number two is I think founders do too much themselves, and
They definitely like to get in the weeds.
I am guilty of this myself as well. So even today, right, like I still take all my client meetings, and I like doing that, and I will always continue to do that. But eventually, I'm going to hit a peak that is not going to be impactful for me to do that. It's just going to eat up too much of my time. So for me, like I'm giving out the advice, but part of it is also like, how do I, take some of the advice that I'm giving as well, and continuously improve. How can I delegate even better? How can I prioritize my time even better? How do I balance work life better as a founder? So I think that's like a big piece of just doing too much yourself, and it's particularly dangerous because doing too much yourself oftentimes mean you're not building the right company culture to empower people, to give people opportunities to take ownership, and that becomes dangerous. The other piece is like hiring as well. So hiring the wrong people and not setting them up for success. So I would say a lot of people think, and this is founders that I've worked with as well at Ops Army, a lot of people think that hiring is all about finding the right people, which is like totally not true. That's
A lot
only
of
part of
cultural.
the equation. The other part is that, cultural piece. You want to set them up for success. And so oftentimes what this means is people will just hire someone on and give them a ton of responsibilities and expect them to succeed, right? Which is like just frankly not going to happen. Imagine, Andy, if we threw you in the middle of the jungle and go off and survive, right? It is going to be a little hard.
Yeah.
Like at least give them like a bow and arrow
Yeah.
or something, right? And so you want to equip your team members with the right tools and the right onboarding experience, and understand that it takes time to learn about a business as well.
Yeah.
So, hiring and talent retention or culture building is also another big one. And then the last piece I'd say is, how do you as a founder keep your energy and your spirits high? So what I mean by that is building a company is so hard. Like I'll say it's really hard, but unless you're actually doing it, you're not going to really feel the true magnitude of the things I say. But every founder, every early operator out there knows building a company is very hard, but it's also really rewarding. And so you want to keep your spirits high. You want to keep your energy levels high. The only way to do that is to take care of yourself. So that means getting enough sleep, eating the right foods, working out. But then also the last piece, which I think is very spiritually rewarding, is celebrating the small successes.
Definitely.
Oftentimes as a society, I feel like we, put so
You're
much
not
emphasis.
successful until you get the unicorn status.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Like
Total failure, only sold it for 100 million.
only 100 million.
Yeah.
Oh, disgraceful.
With inflation the way it is these days.
Oh, that's so funny. But I generally think it's true though. As a society, we focus so much on like what are our weaknesses, how can we improve, and we fixate so much on the things that didn't go well. If you flip the script, it's like, there's a lot of things that you can celebrate that are going well. And even today, we throw little celebrations for every net new client we have, and it's these little small things that kind of maintain high morale and keep your spirits high.
That's a great point. We make sure we do that in our marketing teams and across our company as well too. Like just even with a new strategic initiative, just a small win there, just to kind of see and show people that it's kind of going in the right direction, just kind of motivates people more to just keep pushing the pulling the sled forward, I guess, if you will.
Mhm.
So yeah, those are some really great tips. So I guess let's talk a little bit more about your company before we wrap up. I guess what's some things that people should know about your company to pick your company over, say, a competitor out there. Since we have you guys in our marketplace, we'd rather have people come to you and come to us and buy you guys. So we'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, no, thank you for that, Andy. So I think it's a few things, right? Like hands down, we have the top 1% of talent across the world. And so a lot of companies out there that might offer similar services or products as we do, they focus on specific geographies, for example, the Philippines. And that's great. And you see a lot of top talent coming out of the Philippines. But the reality of it is that those people are working graveyard shifts where it's nighttime for them, daytime for you. And so there's going to be a misconnect there. Time zones and communications are just going to be a little bit different. And so by being geographically agnostic, we can hire top talent from anywhere in the world that we want, whether it's South America, Latin America, even parts of Africa, like Nigeria has really, really good folks as well, Europe, Asia as well. So I would say top 1% of talent across the world, period. Number two is like superior customer and user experience. And so what I mean by that is at the end of the day, this is a people business. And so I spend a lot of my time building trust, establishing relationships with people. And so what this looks like is, for any new customer, like you and I will work very directly together, and that will continue to happen for the very long foreseeable future, I hope. And, I like kind of taking customer calls. I like, I still have clients who text me. I respond to them over text. I'm very quick to respond to communications. And then after our talent starts, we have whole teams set up to help support on the onboarding experience. And then also like performance management, training, leadership development as well. So for example, this is another tactical example. We placed a data analyst at a software company where basically the role was like revenue operations. And so they, came in, had experience with HubSpot, but the company was using Salesforce. So the talent was like, hey, can you train me a little bit on how to use Salesforce and how to pull SQL queries from Salesforce? Perfect. Set them up with a coach that we have on the back end. We were able to take care of that. And so, that kind of user experience is something that I'm particularly proud of. We also support on like playbook creation, process creation, system building as well. And then the last thing I would say is, for us, we're very flexible in terms of our engagements and our hours and how much support you need. We understand that, for a business, like we come in as a trusted partner and we want to earn your trust as well. And so what that means is, let's come in, let's work together. We're not looking to like run you down into the grounds with these high rates, right? We're flexible on the number of hours you need. We're flexible on the rates. Our goal is for you to be successful because we would love to work with the next Uber and the next Airbnb and then just build that kind of partnership over time, over like a very, very long time horizon. So those are the things that set us apart.
Well, it sounds great to me, Tony. Yeah, it's good to see that you guys are focusing on the quality. You guys are focusing on the onboarding experience too, right? You don't just, delegate people off to some company and just hope they sink or swim. It's good to have that white glove experience, I guess, if you will. So, we really appreciate having you guys as a partner and having you guys as a part of our B2B SaaS marketplace. So I definitely recommend all of our audience to check out Operations Army today and the B2B SaaS marketplace, the best way to buy SaaS. Check it out today for 15% off. We have some of the best products you have in the software market, including Tony's company here. So once again, Tony, really appreciate you coming on today and appreciate our partnership and looking forward to growing our companies together.
Fantastic. Thanks for having me, Andy.
You too, bud. Bye.